Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We are hoping to start a series called The Old Testament Made Simple. This series was written and copyrighted by Melton Short. Mr. Short lives in Clanton, Alabama, has a ministry called Bible Made Simple Ministries. It used to be World Impact Ministries. Their address is P.O. Box 412, Clanton, Alabama, 35046. His telephone number is 205-280-0999. He can be reached through email at wimpact@earthlink.net. We hope to use this material over what will be 12 sessions. We are recording these sessions and we'll post them each Wednesday night over the next little while. Hopefully we will not have to complete the series by viewing it over the next 12 weeks. I hope you view it on your own after we've started back having services at the church. But at any rate, we will have this for future reference. You can come back and look at it from time to time. I first became familiar with this study when Tiffany and I were in Belize back in 2006-2007. Mr. Short sent us these books and I was able to use them at the high school I was teaching at in Belize. This series takes the Bible and puts it in a very easy to understand format. After you go through this study, you should be able to know major things about the Old Testament. And so we'll start through this series and we'll do the best we can to do it. One thing I want you to try to come away with is a skeleton view of the Old Testament. Now, when you think of the human anatomy, the skeleton is the base. On top of that, you've got the veins and the arteries, you've got the muscles, you've got the nerves, you've got the skin, all the external features of the skeleton. But at our core is the bones and the skeleton. So what we're going to try to do with this study over the next 12 lessons is get a skeleton view of the Old Testament. Now, once you have that skeleton view of the Old Testament, you can add to that skeleton tons of information and continue to grow your knowledge of the Bible. But by having that skeleton view, that initial framework, it makes the rest of the Bible so much easier to understand. When I first went through this study myself, I was amazed at how much I did not know about the history and the framework of the Old Testament. So I hope after we go through this series that you will have a better understanding of the Old Testament. Jason's here, Emery's here, Tiffany's here. We are going through this Bible study during this time that we're shut in. Hopefully they'll have a better understanding of the Old Testament when we're finished. Jason seems awfully excited about this study as he is just thrilled to go through it with us. But anyway, I hope even he has a clearer appreciation of the skeleton framework of the Bible when we're all said and done. This skeleton is composed of several facts, and as we put these facts together, we're going to make 8 trips through the Bible. Now, each time we go through the Bible, we're going to have a different set of facts and a different set of information, and hopefully when we're finished, we'll put all of that information back together to have our skeleton framework of the Old Testament, and it'll all make sense. So hopefully that's what we will accomplish. 8 trips through the Bible. As we look at those 8 trips through the Bible or through the Old Testament, these are the things that we're going to look at. And I'm going to have Amory zoom in on just the wording so that you can see these trips through the Old Testament. The first trip that we're going to make through the Old Testament is the geographical moves. During their 4,000-year history, the people of the Old Testament made 7 major geographical moves. And it's absolutely incredible just how clear-focused the entire Old Testament can be just by knowing those 7 moves in sequence, the circumstances surrounding each move, why it was made, and how that move fits into God's overall plan. You can get that in 30 minutes, yet it gives you a complete skeleton from Genesis all the way through the entire Old Testament. Now the next section is the 20 key people. The second trip focuses on key people. I am told that there are 2,930 people named in the Bible, the most of which are in the Old Testament. But every single one of the hundreds and hundreds there can in one way or another be connected with one or more of the 20 people that we have chosen. No one can learn 2,930, but almost anyone can learn 20. And since these are the key people, and since all the others can be connected to one or more of them, I suggest that you be real familiar with these 20, that you know who they are, what they did, how each one fits into God's overall plan. Once you are comfortable with these 20, simply connect each one to the person before and the person after, and you will have a chronological chain that goes through the entire Old Testament. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the 3 major divisions of the Old Testament. And what we'll do is we'll break down the Old Testament into 3 major divisions. We'll go over each division of the Old Testament. And as we go over those divisions of the Old Testament, you should come away with the ability to recite the books of the Old Testament. And once we show you those 3 major divisions, it will make it so much easier for you to recite the books of the Bible. So we'll work on that. The next thing is the 11 books that contain 95% of the narrative of the Old Testament. There are 11 books in the Old Testament, and when you read those 11 books, it tells you the entire history of the children of Israel from the Garden of Eden until the time of Jesus Christ. So we're going to learn those 11 books, and then we will know 95% of the narrative of the Old Testament. So once we know those books, we know most of the history of the Old Testament. Then we're going to do a quick way to remember the basic content of each book. So once we learn the books, then we're going to try to learn what's in each book, the basic content of each book, so we can better understand those books. So once we put all of that together, you'll have a good idea of the 11 books that contain 95% of the narrative and a way to remember each of those books. The next thing we're going to do is the 7 major covenants. God has from time to time made covenants with the people of Israel, the children of Israel, and now covenants with you and I. And so we're going to learn those 7 major covenants. And as we learn those covenants, we'll learn how God's relationship with the children of Israel has evolved over time to the point that He has a relationship with us today. And after we do the 7 major covenants, then we're going to do the 5 major time periods. During the time of the children of Israel, from the time of the Garden of Eden up until the time of Jesus Christ, there are 5 major time periods. We're going to learn those 5 major time periods and then try to put that information together. And then lastly, we're going to learn the 50 major events of the Old Testament. Once we get to this point and begin to put these 50 major events together, you're going to be amazed at how much you have learned about the Old Testament in a relatively short period of time. Okay, next we have 3 basic principles of the made simple concept. Once again, as we go through this study, we are developing the skeleton of the Old Testament. So I don't want you to get tied down in the details of the stories. I want you to see the skeleton, the basic facts. Grab a few of those facts as we go through, stick them in your memory banks, and then when we get finished, you'll have a good skeleton view of the Old Testament. The first one is the bare bone basic facts. Each of those 8 trips that we take through the Old Testament, you're going to pick up additional facts. And then each time we have a lesson, we'll review the facts that we've already covered. So as we go, you'll be adding facts to get that basic view, skeleton view of the Old Testament. All right, second basic principle is you're going to take a handful of facts, one category at a time, and fully digest it. Right now, you don't have handouts in front of you. Tiffany and the kids are taking notes as we go through. We'll try to figure out a way to get a book in your hand. I have contacted Mr. Short, and we're going to try to see about getting some more of these books, having these books available, and then hopefully we can get them into your home so that you will have a workbook to actually go through as we're going through this lesson. So we're going to go one category at a time, and then we want to fully digest that category. So as we do a lesson, I want you to get the information, spend a little time with what we've covered in that particular session, turn the session off, and then try to, in your mind, think about what you've actually done and what you've actually learned. Hopefully, when you're finished, you will be able to lay in bed at night with your eyes closed and see the Old Testament skeleton, okay? The last thing we're going to do is memorize the sequence of that small number of facts. So you're going to get some facts, one category at a time, fully digest it, memorize the sequence of that number of facts. And when you're finished, hopefully you will have achieved the goal. By the time we finish the course, you will be able to lie in your bed in total darkness and go through the entire Old Testament in skeleton form. So that's the goal. After each session, you want to review it over and over in your head and get that understanding of the story. So we're going to talk now about the Fertile Crescent. All of the events in the Bible occurred in the Fertile Crescent. Now we call it the Fertile Crescent because there's 2 major rivers that flow through here, and the land in this area is very fertile for growing crops. And it's shaped like a half moon, a crescent. So they call it the Fertile Crescent. It lies between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea. Starting over here near the Persian Gulf, runs up, crests over, and comes back out at the Mediterranean Sea. Alright, as we look at the Fertile Crescent, now we want to add some places to the Fertile Crescent. We got the idea that the Fertile Crescent starts in the Persian Gulf, moves up around 600 miles and over to the Mediterranean Sea. So now let's begin to put some other places along this map. The Persian Gulf, of course, is over here. Ur is the city where Abraham was born. Ur is right here, just north of the Persian Gulf. So that's the birthplace of Abraham. Then we have, of course, the Fertile Crescent as we move over. And here, just south, is Egypt, the nation of Egypt. Joseph was in Egypt, and the children of Israel were in bondage in Egypt, and the plagues happened in Egypt. Okay, so you have the Fertile Crescent just south of the Fertile Crescent. You have the nation of Egypt. Now over here you have the Mediterranean Sea, just outside the Fertile Crescent. Now as you go through the Mediterranean Sea, of course, you would go to Italy, to Greece, and on out to Spain, and then out into the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so the Mediterranean Sea. Right here is the nation of Israel. Same place where Israel is today. Okay, so you have the nation of Israel right here at the Fertile Crescent. And then you have here in this big area the desert. And that is, of course, still desert today. Okay? So the places we want to remember as we're putting the basic structure to the Fertile Crescent is we want to know where the Persian Gulf is. We want to know where the Mediterranean Sea is. We know that the Fertile Crescent is the moon shape in between those two bodies of water. Is just north of the Persian Gulf, the birthplace of Abraham. Egypt, just south of the Mediterranean Sea and the Fertile Crescent. The nation of Israel, and the desert. Now, most everything that occurs in the Bible occurs in this Fertile Crescent area. So, if you understand the geography of this area, you'll understand the geography of the entire Old Testament. Okay, now, we're going to play a little game, and we're going to make your room a map. Now, wherever you're watching this, I want you to make your room a map, okay? You're facing me. My left is your right. So, to your right, look at the back corner of your room. Okay? To your right, look at the back corner of your room. Emery, Jason, Tiffany. That's the back corner, okay? Now imagine that's the Persian Gulf. Okay? Okay. That's the Persian Gulf. Now, as you come from that back corner up toward me and around to this back corner, which would be to your left, what? That's the Fertile Crescent. Okay? Now, beyond this wall, to your left, my right, is the Mediterranean Sea. Just below the Fertile Crescent, in the back left-hand corner, is the nation of Egypt. Okay? Israel is right up from the nation of Egypt.
Right here.
And then all the space in the center of the room is the desert. Right? Y'all got it? Alright, now say it out loud with me.
Okay.
What is the body of water on this side of the room in the corner?
Persian Gulf.
Persian Gulf. The city just north of the Persian Gulf where Abraham was born. The land in between, from there up this way.
The Fertile Crescent.
The Fertile Crescent. The body of water just beyond that wall.
The
Mediterranean Sea. The nation just south of the Fertile Crescent.
Egypt.
The nation just back this side of Egypt. Israel. And all the land in between? The desert. Okay, let's do it one more time. What's beyond the right-hand corner? What body of water? Persian Gulf. The city just north of the Persian Gulf where Abraham was born. The land in between.
Fertile Crescent.
The Fertile Crescent. The body of water outside that wall.
Mediterranean Sea.
The nation just south of the Fertile Crescent.
Egypt.
The nation just north of Egypt.
Israel.
And the land in between.
Desert.
The desert. All right, Jason, come up here
Oh no.
where you can be seen. Stand right here in front of the television. All right, look at the camera. All right, what's beyond that back corner? What body of water?
Persian Gulf.
Persian Gulf. The city just north where Abraham was born. The land in between.
Fertile
It comes up the Fertile Crescent. What body of water is outside the door?
The Mediterranean Sea.
Mediterranean Sea. What nation is just south of the Fertile Crescent?
Egypt.
The nation just north of there.
Israel.
And what's in between?
The desert.
The desert. All right, good job. Okay. That's what I want you to do when you're lying in your bed tonight. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to see the Fertile Crescent. Go to the corner of the room to your right and behind you. That's the Persian Gulf, the body of water. Persian Gulf, the city just north of that the city where Abraham was born. The Fertile Crescent that comes up around the room. Just outside to your left, the wall to your left will be the Mediterranean Sea. Just south of the Fertile Crescent, the nation is Egypt. Just north of Egypt is Israel. And the land in between is the desert. Okay? So I want you to be able to see that in your head. Rehearse it over the next several days, over and over and over again, until you have it fixed in your brain. All right. Let's I can't get my slide to move. Okay. Here we have the Fertile Crescent. And we want to look at these places again, and we're going to add some more geography to the Fertile Crescent. All right, so we have our major places. We have the Persian Gulf, the body of water outside the right back corner, the city just north, which is the place where Abraham was born, the Fertile Crescent, the body of water outside the door to the right, the Mediterranean Sea, the city to the south of the Fertile Crescent, or the nation to the south of the Fertile Crescent, Egypt, the nation just above Egypt, Israel. These are our main places, and the land in between there is the desert. Okay? So these are our major points. Now, we're going to add a couple of more points. And as you study the Bible, you'll add even more points to this map. Okay? But I want you to get these places in your mind. We'll go over them as we go. All right, here we had the place where Abraham was born. Here we have Babylon. The king of Babylon was Nebuchadnezzar, right? We have the story of Daniel and the lion's den that occurred in Babylon. We have the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the 3 Hebrew children that were cast into the fiery furnace. Those places occurred, those stories occurred in Babylon. All right, here you have approximately a place where it's thought to have been Eden. The Garden of Eden would have been between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers that run through the Fertile Crescent. The Tigris is on the top, the Euphrates is on the bottom. And Babylon sat right between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Eden, possibly right between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Now, right up here, another city we're going to add, Haran. Haran is the first place that Abraham moved to when God called him out of his hometown of Ur. So he moved from Ur to Haran, and we'll talk about that more later. Right here, you have a river that flows from the Sea of Galilee and down into the Dead Sea. And that river is called the Jordan River. Who was baptized in the Jordan River? Jesus was, right? Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River. John was baptizing. So we'll learn about the Jordan River. Down here in Egypt, when the children of Israel come out of Egypt, what body of water did they cross?
The Red Sea.
The Red Sea. Where did Moses receive the 10 Commandments?
Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai, right here. Where did the children of Israel camp before they went into the Promised Land?
Moab.
In Moab. Okay? So these places we're going to add to the map. We'll practice filling those in our next session. So we'll work some more on this map and put these places in our head. But Babylon, Eden, Haran, Moab, Mount Sinai, the Red Sea, the Jordan River, the Tigris, and the Euphrates rivers. Those are key points for our Fertile Crescent map. If you get this map firmly fixed in your brain, most all the stories in the Bible will come into perspective, and you'll be able to see what was going on where. Between these points, when we come back next session, we're going to talk about the moves, the 7 moves of the children of Israel, the geographical moves of the children of Israel from one place to another. So we'll talk about that in our next lesson. But let's look at one thing here, the importance of getting the map in our mind. You'll find that the stories of the Old Testament are far more interesting and far easier to remember if you can tell where the story is taking place, where in the Fertile Crescent the story actually happened. It will help you understand the story. And then also you will find that as you read more and more from the scriptures, that dozens of additional locations will drop in place. They'll drop into the map that you have in your head of the Fertile Crescent. They'll drop in place almost by themselves because you have a place to put them. You have a skeleton framework in your head of the Fertile Crescent, and you have a place to put additional places that you learn as you go. So it's very important that you get this map in your head. It's very important that you understand these key places along the map. So I want you to practice over the next week. I'll try to put on Facebook a picture of the map, the Fertile Crescent map, so that you can refer back to it. Maybe trace it off on paper at home and study it for yourself. But we'll make that available. Thank you for tuning in to the first session of the Old Testament Made Simple by Melton Short.